back to La Bolla. Oh my God, we've been away for a 3-month summer and ouch, look around, it's awful, we're gonna have to start again. Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to be sharing with you our challenges of running a Brexit garden. So we're in this unusual position, result of Brexit, which is when the UK left the European Union. And under Brexit regulations, you can only spend 90 days out of 180 days in the European Union. Unless you apply for residency, which is what we're trying to work on at the moment. We got rejected for the visa, so we're going to try and get residency through getting a European passport some other way. It means that we spend 3 months here and 3 months away. We no longer have a house in the UK, so we travel in the 3 months that we're away, and when we're here, we work non-stop. The first month is spent catching up on what's happened since we've been away, usually overgrown land, 4 acres of it, overgrown garden, and also wildlife and things like that, and fruit that has happened. And then the middle months we might actually make some progress in what we're trying to do as a project. And then the last month is usually spent getting ready for being away for the next 3 months.
And did you vote for Brexit, Sal?
No, I didn't vote for Brexit. I wanted the UK to stay in the European Union. And if we'd managed to stay in the European Union, we wouldn't have a problem with residency.
What did I vote for?
You voted to leave, you idiot.
But it's not a tension point, this. This is not a tension point. And in your travelling, Sal, where are we just coming back from? The 2 countries?
Costa Rica and Ecuador.
And where are we going to in the wintertime?
Sri Lanka and Turkey.
So don't feel sorry for us.
I'd much rather be here. Right, so as soon as we arrived, we had to prioritise. And for me, the priority really was to make us feel good about looking out into the inner garden. So I spent 3 days weeding. And I say days, but a challenge of this time of year is actually your days are quite short. The sun gets really hot. So after mid-morning, late morning, you can't really do anything until late afternoon again. It's unusual for September. The locals are all saying it's not usually 37 degrees in the middle of September. So, but 3 days spent weeding this and it looks a lot better now. And
who were the only people out weeding and working at that time?
It's you and me, as in mad dogs and Englishmen.
Yeah. And I think I'm the mad dog or you're an Englishman. Which one? Nobody else was out.
Right, so we were really shocked when we got back after 3 months away. There's been no rain for 3 months. It's been a brutal, brutal summer, according to the locals, with heat of between 40 to 45 degrees. So naively, I assumed nothing would grow. How wrong were we? The weeds were everywhere. And actually, some of the plants, some of the shrubs at the front in zone 1 here have grown quite well. The buddleias up that end, 2 different types of buddleia. The ratamas here has grown well, and there's a number of ones, I think probably 50% on this side have done really well. The others not so, but we're sort of reserving judgment until the rain comes. Although the first thing we did was to sink 10 litres of water into each watering basin as a priority along here on the first evening we arrived. And that takes me on to the pigweed. So when we left, before we left in May, 2 things happened. The rotavator broke. And Pete had to order the part specially, so it never got fixed before we left. But he'd already rotavated under the big olive trees, and in May we noticed the appearance of a weed that we hadn't seen before. There's some of them left here. They're called pigweeds or red root amaranth, and when they're young and the ground has just been cultivated, they're really easy to pull out. But we saw them growing and we couldn't do anything about it because it would take an hour per tree. We've got 45 big trees. We just didn't have that time to pull them out manually. So we got back and they're literally up to here. So our approach is to try and break the cycle, and bearing in mind that we very unwittingly unleashed the beast, because the seeds lie dormant for up to 15 years. So by rotivating the soil properly, we probably inadvertently activated the seeds that had been dormant, and that's why it was in the areas that we had rotivated. So Pete's bush cutted. I'm going to clear the scrub. We'll burn the scrub, the dead pigweeds, and next year we rotivate as soon as we see them. And hopefully over time we'll break the cycle. But we did just create an awful lot more work for ourselves. So, but trying to be bio-friendly and diverse-friendly and everything, here we have some of the pistachio trees, 6 of them. 39 new fruit trees went into the ground in November last year and had a really good winter of rain. However, they have suffered in the 3 months that we've been away, and I didn't want to put it on anybody or pay anybody to come in and water the plants. I think naively again, we were sort of expecting at least one big thunderstorm in the summer. It hasn't happened. So the pistachios have done relatively okay, but there's a number, and I'd say 50% of what we put in November maybe hasn't survived. We won't know until the rain comes, and if there's new growth, then we'll keep them in, but if not, we're going to have to take them out. So these are 2 plum trees that we put in.
But you've got green on the top.
Got 2 green little leaves on the ends. It's pathetic.
They might come back.
If the roots are healthy and still alive, then we might just stand a chance. But this one looks really very sad indeed. And there's one little plum. What would have been a good plum? Not a plum.
Okay, one of the other jobs is when we came back, Sally and I were, I think a good word is disheartened as we arrived. We pulled into the driveway and there were weeds were up to here, both sides. All that work that we'd done before we went away was just like, and as we drove up the driveway was the same. It was weeds, there was building stuff, all sorts of things. So one of the things that I decided that we were going to do, because we were going to make it our house, is we were going to put a proper driveway in. So I spent a day pickaxing the weeds out of here because they were amazing. They were in and all the rest of it. Then we put 4.5 tons of sand down with a membrane, and then 2 further days of putting 2 lots of 4.5 tons down of breccia. So we put about 9 tons of breccia, 4.5 tons of sand, a membrane underneath it. And now when we drive up the first time, it actually looks like a really nice driveway. And not only we just finished this, but then our builder goes toot toot, pitches up, and he looks at it and he goes, oh great, now we can put a gate on. So we're going to get a gate soon as well. We're going to get a 3/4 gate, so the gate's going to go, a big one 3/4 this side, a small one this side, so we can open up and come in and out. And it feels like almost a house, and it's visually pleasing for both Sally and myself to come up here now rather than just looking at weeds and dirt and builders stuff. And it's really nice. I like it.
If you like the video that we're doing, please give us a thumbs up, or you can feel free to make comments. We will respond, and we'd love it if you subscribed.
Before we went away last time, we spent a huge amount of time dropping the height on the trees and actually cutting out this really nasty disease called Xylella, which is just rampaging through southern Italy and killing everything in its path. We're going to try, and we're trying to save our Cellina donados, which are lovely old trees. And what we did before we went away is that we physically went up each tree, cut the individual branches out with Xylella, and then when I was up there I actually found olive knot on them as well. So I cut all those out completely, dropped our trees by 4 meters, and they looked really, really sad when we left. And now I'm really pleased because it's actually not looking too bad. A lot of the trees have responded to it, so we're hoping that with inordinate amounts of time spent on the trees, looking after them individually, that we might just save them from Xylella. And we might be the only people around here that will end up with Chilena donado trees, because the rest will be dead, like our neighbours on the left and the right.
Right, so having a pool is also a complication when it comes to being away for 3 months. Somehow it needs to be maintained, and you can either pay a lot of money and have a contractor coming to maintain it for you, or you can do like we did and sort of did a reciprocal deal with our neighbours and invited them to use the pool if they in return kept the pool clean. Trouble was, in the meantime, my son and his 10 friends altogether, I think, over 2 weeks, used the pool, jumped in it, splashed around in it, had inflatables in it, played volleyball in it, and the level of the water dropped to below the skimmer without anybody realising, which meant that it was no longer turning the water and it wasn't being topped up from anywhere because we hadn't set it up with that system. So 2 weeks after my son had left, the pool went green, and our neighbours panicked and told us that the pool has got algae in it, and we had to get the plumbers back who had actually installed the pool. Here's us in Ecuador at the time, and to try and resolve the situation. And it's looking lovely again now, but they did spend a lot of time on it. We had to get a water delivery done, and we've learned a lot from that whole process.
While Sally was doing some of her things, we divvied up the time a little bit, and after finishing the driveway, last year we bought a motorised tractor, massive industrial type strimmer, and I actually started to attack the land, because when we got back here, not only were we couldn't basically see the land from the front, pigweed was everywhere, and we have weeds all the way over the land as well. So yesterday I spent about 2 or 3 hours starting to do that job. And if you look down the bottom, that's me strimming 2 or 3 hours worth down there. To my left, we have a bank of pigweed where I rotivated last year, and it seems to love that. And to the right, we've got the land where we've got all of the weeds.
So we're sort of getting a feel for what we both jump into to prioritise when we come back after 3 months. And I'm sort of veering towards survival of the plants. So if it hasn't rained like this time, the first thing I did, and it did take probably a whole day in total, was to sink 10 litres of water into every plant's watering basin or fruit tree's watering basin. That's a lot of trips with 10 litre watering cans for me, but it's really important. So that was the first thing. That got spread over a few days. Then the inner garden weeding was for me a really important bit to do, because that's what we look at most, and it wasn't good for the karma to see all these weeds surrounding the plants that I didn't know or not whether they had survived at the time. For Pete, in order to feel better about generally the place looking like a right mess, the driveway was obviously a priority, and that's making progress. You know, that's something that I wouldn't have expected till month 2, so that was an important one. And then it's sort of going out onto the land and clearing the pigweed is going to take about 4 days, so 3 days on the inner garden, probably a good 4 days clearing the pigweed, probably a day picking the almonds off the trees, which are really more than ready to come off the trees. We've got 12 almond trees absolutely brimming with almonds, so fruiting, harvesting is important as well. And for Pete, obviously he's talked about it, but the strimming of this land is important for us. We're not turning the land anymore. It's better for nature if we leave it, and we want to plant stuff in between the olive trees. But because of that, it looks like a right old mess for most of the time. So we're feeling slightly more on top of it now, 3 weeks in. We're gradually working our way around the land. Pete has trimmed the land. We've picked the almonds, which were probably the latest people in Puglia to pick our almonds, but we're processing those. They're nice toasted with olive oil on them and a bit of salt. And a good example here, we've still got all the trees to desucker, the olive trees. they're surrounded by growth from the bottom, which has got to come off really, not only because it's a sign of Xylella, but also because it makes it easier to harvest the olives, which is what we're going to be doing in a few weeks' time. So we're on top, we're feeling more in control, feeling a bit more relaxed about it. We're 3 weeks in. So this is one of 2 large piles of pigweed that we've collected so far, and which is going to be burned after a little shake, because there's lizards that go in here. I know they do. We don't want to burn those alive. So if you enjoyed this episode, please do join us for the next one, which is all about the top 5 pieces of machinery that we've bought to help us to manage this 4 acres of land.